And what? I've missed that intro. Welcome back to another edition and another season of the podcast. Of course, this is the podcast where we cover the National League on a weekly basis when the season does start. Tonight, I am pleased to be joined by my co-host, Paul. Paul, I want to see what you're wearing here. For those who watched the podcast last year, will understand why he's wearing this. For those who are new, he's not a Barnet fan. Tell us a little bit more about why you're appearing in a Barnet shirt, Paul.
Because I'm not very good at predictions, Luke. And as you know, we sort of went head-to-head over the season, predicting the National League scores as they went through week on week. I know we missed some, and you had some guest appearances when I wasn't available. But yeah, we came to an agreement that one of us would wear a shirt of our sort of hated opposition, if you like, tongue in cheek. So I've had to wear a Barnet shirt. So I thank Trevor Nell for the loan of the shirt. He did have to find me an XL because I put a bit of plod on, and I've actually got, I don't know if you can see it, but it's a Nicky Bailey match-worn shirt from probably the mid-2000s. I mean, it was back when kits were particularly baggy as well, and it's got the EFL or the Coca-Cola Football League badge on. So it took a bit of time to get the shirt, but I've done it, Luke, and I've promised you that I'd wear it, and here I am. My children are disgusted with me. They're like, what's he doing? But it's all a bit of fun, and for the evening, I've got the Barnet shirt on.
Fair enough. It does suit you. I'm going to ask you again, will we be doing this for the 24-25 season?
Yeah, of course we will. Yeah. I want to see you in whatever shirt that you don't want to wear. So, you pick a shirt that you don't want to wear, and hopefully I'll win this time.
Yeah, hopefully from your perspective, you will. We might have to pull out even more stops next year. Get the hat, get everything out there. But no, fair enough. Thank you for doing that. To be fair, takes a lot of guts, especially on the podcast. But anyway, let's get into what we are going to be talking about tonight. So, of course, it's the first episode of the podcast for the 24-25 season. We are carrying on with our National League coverage. For those who are new, for those who are just tuning in tonight, basically we cover the National League on a weekly basis from August until the season does end, which is usually about April, May time. We do a few interviews, bonus episodes as well, all surrounding the National League. We often also do the odd vlogs here and there as well. For those who don't know, Paul, Wealdstone fan, of course, rivals to Barnet, quite a big hatred there. For me, I'm a Halifax fan myself. You could probably tell from somewhere up north. Halifax fan myself, hoping to finally get out of this division. Maybe there's a possibility, but we know how difficult this division certainly is, and there's still a lot of big clubs remaining. Paul, firstly then, let's think about this season, because we look at previous seasons. Last season, there were the big dogs in there. Chesterfield were the favourites. They did go on to storm the division. Of course, Oldham were there last year as well. Southend, York have all remained in the National League for this season. So we've still got those large clubs. But obviously, with the National League, you don't look at those sides, in my opinion, and think they're going to go and storm the division like we thought Chesterfield would. So would you say maybe this season, heading into it, it's going to be a very open division?
Without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, you'd like to have thought by now that the Southend situation would have been resolved and you'd put a claim in for them to be near the top, because, what they did on the backdrop of the off-the-field issues last season was something short of incredible and very nearly made the playoffs. And you give a good argument for them. They've kept a lot of their squad, but it's still rumbling on the ownership and everything else. So I think it is a very open league, and that is very obvious when you look at someone like Barnet's recruitment. It's ironic I've got the shirt on tonight, but you've got to look at them as one of the early favourites, Luke. They've gone and made some really impressive signings. They made 12 signings so far, Dean Brennan, and from across the leagues. And I think they see the opportunity now that Chesterfield, Notts, Stockport, Wrexham have all gone in the last couple of seasons, and they're almost Bromley. They're almost sort of saying we're the next ones up, step up, and next ones to go. And I think it's been impressive recruitment. Tony Cleanthos, their owners, clearly come in and sort of said, right, this is the season, let's go and let's try and win the league.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Barnet, for me, they're a side that, of course, have had the financial issues in the past, but over the last couple of seasons, it's been, I think, a fairly successful rebuild. The season prior to last season, they managed to finish inside the playoffs after a horrendous season in the previous year before that, about 3 years ago. And then a lot of people might have thought maybe it was a one-off for Barnet to finish in the playoffs, and they might fall off and maybe drop back into mid-table, lower mid-table. But instead, they went even one better last season, and they managed to finish second. And of course, they probably were the favourites to go up through the playoffs. And if there wasn't Chesterfield in the division, they would have gone on to win the league. But of course, they did stumble in the playoffs, losing to Solihull Moors. I think it's another example of how the playoffs can be so different to the league. I think in the league, you probably would have backed them to win that game, being at home and having such a successful home record. But I think all of that kind of things go out of the window in the playoffs. So you'd like to think this season, especially that they've managed to keep the squad together. They haven't particularly had any major losses. You'd like to think that they'll be up there once again, and maybe they can do one better this season, especially with Chesterfield exiting the division and no particularly sides that I feel coming into the division that are going to threaten at the top immediately.
No, completely agree. And, there's a strong argument for those teams that are always naturally towards the top end. Altrincham, how do they deal with the fact they've lost Chris Con-Clark, which was a real blow to them? Real creative spark, but they've been a real settled force. Solihull will pick up. They've not had the summer they had last year. Andy Wing really had to rebuild that squad, and getting to 2 Wembley finals is really going to help them solidify and have the confidence to try and push on for a playoff place. Oldham, if they can get that, if they can get their shit together, Oldham are going to be up there. They've stuck with Mickey. They've stuck with Mickey Mellon. They've made a few signings that are a little bit more experienced that have come into the squad. Forest Green, they're an unknown quantity. Sutton United have had a real shuffle and almost a rebuild. They've got rid of a lot of players. An awful lot of strikers last year, and they still didn't sort of perform. But so listen, it's very early. There's still transfers going on. They've just gone back pre-season training this week. The friendly starting, Saturday onwards, and it'd be really interesting to see how the squads mould. But what I do like the fact of is, Luke, is that there's not been many managerial changes. I suppose really the only one that's significant would be the Wealdstone manager, Matt Taylor, coming in. Sam Cox has gone and Matt Taylor's come in, and Wealdstone have gone onto that hybrid model and a full-time manager. So, there's progress off the field. So it'd be interesting to see how they get on. But they're quite settled in the management front, and that's allowed them to go and get the squads that they want. And you can really see that in the way the squads are being moulded again this summer. A lot of almost trading, players moving around in the same league. So another interesting one, another one full of quality. And if it's as good as it was last year, then it's going to be an absolute bonkers one, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is going to be. And I think every single season, it's always bonkers, this division. It's why we love it so much. From a 5-4 game a few years ago to goalkeepers equalising in the last minute to keep sides in the playoff campaign. It's a mental division, and I think that's why everyone does love it. And to be fair, the unpredictability for me is why I think I love this division so much. And I think especially with there being no side that's, I think, a standout title contender this season, for me, I think it's going to be very open at the top. Anyway, We are nearly 10 minutes in, and I forgot to mention our sponsors who have agreed to sponsor us for the 24-25 National League season, and I haven't even looked at the live chat yet. So a good start to the campaign. But anyway, firstly, I'd like to say a massive thank you to our sponsors, Cards Accepted. If you use the link in the description, you'll get 50% off your card machine. So please go check them out, and also share them about on social media too. Let's also have a look at the live chat. And also for anyone that is new, please remember to like and subscribe. We go live every Thursday from when the season does kick off at 9 p.m. usually. Other episodes as well that we do. We do interviews with managers, players. We also do the odd vlogs here and there. Of course, me being a Halifax fan, it will usually be on Halifax and whoever they're against. But yeah, let's have a look at the live chat then. So, of course, the first one who is in the live chat tonight, it had to be this man. Someone who's probably been watching the podcast since we started about 2 to 3 years ago now when we launched it. And he's come and said, hello, gents. Great to see you back, Luke and Paul, for the new season after your break. Feels great to actually win the FA Trophy to lift our mood, but yet again, major losses as expected. Hope you are well. Yeah, I think for Gates said winning the FA Trophy, a nice end to the season to finally win at Wembley, but the way it ended, I think a lot of it will be what could have been for Gates. And of course, most people who are watching this will be aware that they were essentially kicked out of the playoffs last season due to, maybe you'd say definitely no fault of the fans or the players, but I think due to issues within the council and maybe within the club as well. They were excluded from the playoffs. So it's a massive shame for them. But I think for them, we've seen the progression that they've had at their club over the last couple of years. They've had a few major losses, but they've already started to recruit. I know 2 20-year-olds are coming from championship clubs from Middlesbrough and they won Derby as well. So, they're a side that for me, with Rob Elliott in charge, they're very well known for the recruitment. So you'd like to think they'll be able to find those replacements for the players that have lost. They have lost. Also, we'll move on to the next one. Someone's coming, Southend United for the title. I don't think so with everything that's going on off the field at the moment. I just can't believe it's still going on. I thought in December, when we put out that documentary, and then afterwards when it was all announced that there was this takeover, I thought it were done, basically, and it was just going to happen in a few weeks or a few months. Yet we're in blooming July of the following season, and Southend are still having these financial issues. It's just a repetitive circle, isn't it, Paul?
No, yeah, it's incredible, and you hope that Southend don't go into this campaign like they did the last one, where they just need to survive as a football club for the community and the fans, and I think we saw a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, didn't we, Luke, after that documentary? And we're in contact with Chris, who does a lot of the reporting for Southend, and it all seemed fairly positive, and they've pumped a lot of money in these new prospective owners, but it's being held up, and they're going into another pre-season now, which is a little bit uncertain. So, like I just said, if they can get themselves together, I think they're well within the shout of the title, but it's how much can they strengthen? Who wants to sign for them in this situation? And ultimately, no one's got a crystal ball, but does Kevin Mayer in the end just get fed up with it and end up going somewhere else? He's been very loyal to that football club, and I know he's getting paid and it's his job, but it could have been very easy for him and his staff just to throw the towel in and go somewhere else, because he was producing miracles really on the squads that he had and the performances they were making rather. So Southend for the title, yes, if they can get themselves sorted out, but it looks like that's going to be a long game and it's not going to be sorted soon.
I'd love to see Southend have this takeover and be able to, splash that cash that, a side like that deserves to see. They deserve something, to happen there, because they've got a massive fan base for this division. They shouldn't be in this division. They're probably a League One sized club, to be fair, and they're a club that have clearly got the potential there to even grow the fan base even more. So for me, I just want to see this club take off and be able to compete at the top without having any financial issues like they had in the previous year. We've had another Chesterfield fan. There'll always be a few that remain. We'd like to see a fair few. It'd be nice to see them return. Of course, Wrexham, we've got a few of their fans that still tune in, same with Notts County. But he's come in and said, hello, lads, still be tuning in. Made some good signings ready for League Two. Yeah, most sides who get out of this division seem to do well when they enter League Two. We saw Wrexham do well. Stockport, of course, got into League One now with Wrexham. Notts County had a good start, of course, maybe not the best ending, but of course managed to survive in League Two. So you'd like to think Chesterfield will be able to make that step up and maybe be able to push to get back into League One. But I think they're just happy to be back in the Football League, to be honest. Then we've had Bob, who's back. Oldham to get top 7, I think, possibly. Yeah, Oldham, they're a club that I want to talk a lot in detail, specifically about Mickey Mellon and the expectations there, because we look at Oldham and the first season down, maybe you could say, was an exception because they're having all that financial difficulty. I think they finished 11th at the end of the season, had a very good end to the season. Last season, everyone were considering them to be challenging Chesterfield for the title with the additions that they made, including, of course, James Norwood, who was in the division. Did okay last season. I wouldn't say set the world alight, but, you know, he was a decent striker for this division. But they didn't particularly progress much on the field. They finished 10th, one place above. They beat the previous points tally by 2 points. They go into this season now, the third season in the division, and you'd probably say the club that have probably got the most financial muscle in the whole of the division. You'd probably say with Rothwell in charge. I want to ask you, Paul, and probably the overall Oldham fan base who watch this, what is their expectation for Oldham? Is it to be in the title race or is it to be just getting the playoffs?
You know, if I was an Oldham fan, I think the first thing I'd look at looking at last season is they just need a consistent run of games at home where they pick up points. They were dreadful at home. You know, Boundary Park should be a fortress for them. I went there last game of the season. You know, yes, Wealdstone had something to play for. Oldham probably didn't. But you could see in the crowd, you could see on the pitch that it was just very, very lethargic and sort of people were fed up with it. So that they've got to go into this new season with a bit of vim and vigor and think, actually, we've got a real good chance here. You know, Mickey Mellon shuffled his pack a little bit. Yes, they get 7, 8, 9,000 watching them on a good day. If they can start to get some good wins and good results at home, that will give them a momentum. They just weren't consistent enough last year, Luke, were they? They just kept, you know, lost to Hendon in the FA Trophy, lose games like Wealdstone at home that you expect to win. They need that, and that fan base will then get behind them. They'll then travel in numbers, and all of a sudden they'll become a bit of a force. It's going to be interesting to see how they start, and if they start badly, you know, is Mickey Mellon under a little bit of pressure? Because there was talk last year, could he go? You know, should they keep him? Will they get rid of the likes of Norwood and others that are on a little bit of money and change it up? Yeah, you know, they managed to keep Fondop, which I think is a bit of a fan's favourite. So it's a real difficult one with Oldham because I think they're a little bit like Southend, but in a different way. If they can get their shit together, they're going to be a force. But it's in a different way of doing that to what Southend are in. You know, it seems like a well-run club. You know, having been up there a couple of seasons in a row, very welcoming. You know, the people are great. It seems like it's ready to be the next Chesterfield, Notts County, Wrexham, Sutton. You know, a bit like what Barnet want to be and get back in that Football League.
I think when we look at Oldham, you look at the managers that they've had since they've come down: Sheridan, Unsworth, now Mickey Mellon. Their fan bases have all asked for the managers to be sacked, and it's becoming like a bit like they're going in circles. Do you think that maybe Mickey Mellon should be given some leeway for a bit of this season? How long would you give him? Because you know, now he's got a full summer to, you'd like to think, be able to bring in his own players. I know he did kind of in the second half of last season, and he knew quite a lot of the players who were at Oldham, but you know, he's got a full summer now at Oldham. You'd like to think they should be up there, and But if they don't start well, we know what that Oldham fan base is like. How long do you reckon we give
And you know what, Luke, you could probably say that about the 24 teams in the league. They've all, apart from Wealdstone, they've all got established managers really in the league. So they're all going to get a really good pre-season, and they're all going to get their own players. And the likes of Mickey Mellon are under maybe more pressure than Angelo Harrop at Braintree, or maybe Matt Taylor at Wealdstone, or Andy Wing at Solihull, because there's no expectation on them to do anything in particular. I would suggest Oldham, National League fans of any club will look at Oldham as a big club. They'll look at Mickey Mellon and say, you've managed in the Football League. You've got teams in the Football League promoted. You know what you're doing. You've got a full-time setup. You've got 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 fans behind you every week. It's going to be a really interesting one for him, because he's going to be under a little bit more pressure than others. And if they don't start well, the fan base will start moaning. Rothwell, does he react to it? Does he stick to his guns? Do they give him a bit of time and stability? What you don't want to do, end up, Luke, is being too far behind the title chase early on in the season. Okay, you can't win the league in September, October, November, but that's when you can start to lose it. And you know that October, November time is going to be a really interesting one for Oldham if not firing on all cylinders and up and there and thereabouts.
They've not particularly gone into this window, have they, and splashed the cash, have they, Oldham, when you look at the signings they've made? So maybe they're trying to be a little bit more cute with those signings instead of just going out there and bringing in a player who's been prolific in League One about 3 years ago. You know, a club who are like that, I'd say, are York as well. You know, they've recruited quite differently, I'd say, to previous years. And I think for me, when I look at it, probably in the right way as well. You know, they've signed players from the league below, but players who've been prolific, and players who the manager who came in towards the end of last season, Adam Hinchelwood, obviously knows from his time at Worthing. So I think it's good to see that Ugler's clearly giving the manager a lot of freedom to bring in his own players. You know, that's something that he's been criticised for in the past. Ollie Peace is one of those signings. He's obviously come in from Worthing. 40 goals he scored last season in the league below. You'd like to think he'll be able to make that step up. Of course, we've seen a number of players do that in previous years, including the likes of Langstaff. Sinclair's come from Rochdale, a player for me that I can't speak highly enough of when I've seen him, still very young as well. Harrison Mayle, who was the goalkeeper at Dorking, probably was their player of the season. So you'd like to think, you look at York's recruitment, I'm pretty impressed. Although you might say it's a bit of a risk because a lot of the players aren't proven in this level, at this level. Is that something you agree with? Or?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that risk. Ollie Pearce done very well in National League South. And, you know, when I watched him live on the telly and saw clips of him, he's a natural goal scorer. He'll score all sorts of goals. And they brought Joe Felix in, who's a winger who's come up through the leagues. I think maybe after start as an apprentice, you know, in the professional game. So Hinchelwood's relied on a couple of players he knows. Harrison Mayle, he knows from Worthing as well. You know, so he's got players that he trusts, and I think that's always really helpful. If you look at York's recruitment last year, it was a real scattergun approach, wasn't it? I think Matt Ugler had maybe more say than you would like as a York fan. You know, he was going out and buying big guns and just getting all these players in, and it really didn't work. And, you know, when you look at the fact that they've loaned Tyler Cordner out, their record signing last year, he's now gone for the season. It speaks volumes of what the recruitment maybe was like last year. You know, they've just let Woodyard, who they got from AFC Wimbledon, has gone to Colchester. You know, so some of the lads that they signed last year who hadn't already been released are going. So it appears Matt Ugler's allowed Hinchelwood to get on with it. When I say they've got, Matt Taylor's the only relatively new manager, you know, please forgive me, I forgot Hinchelwood only came in at the back end of last year, and he had a really rocky start with York. And I know he's dealing with players and changing the formations to what they were used to. But towards the end of it, they really did pick up and got a good few results. And I think, you know, Hinchelwood started to put his mark on that team, and now he's got that summer to do it himself. He plays a really, really good brand of football. York will love him for that, the fans. And I think if Ugler just allows him to go and get the players he wants and has the management team around him and just enjoys spending his money and watching his team, I think York, last year I spoke, quite negatively about them.
Yeah.
I think this year, when you look at them, they could be a real threat, because a bit like Southend, a bit like Barnet, they're a slightly bigger club in this league or a bigger club in this league, and they've got the potential to really fill that ground and get fans behind them and then push on. So, yes, I think York could be a bit of a dark horse, just the way that they're sort of going about their business early on.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I know there's always been that expectation, hasn't there, at York last season everyone was saying instantly they need to be in the playoffs. Some were saying a title charge. A lot of people didn't predict that. I think I predicted them 9th. I think you predicted them quite low. That was probably one of the better predictions from yourself. Of course, they did survive relegation, but there were times where it looked like they could have gone down last season. Unfortunately for them, they've managed to survive in the National League. Where this season, maybe because of that, there isn't that same instant expectation there at York. Maybe it's more of a case of just do better than last season. I think when I look at York, I'd like to think they're going to be in and around the playoffs. Maybe there'd be a shout with how open I feel it is. If they gel well and start well, maybe they could be pushing top 3 and, dare I say it, the title to a certain extent. Maybe that's a little bit unrealistic, you might say. But like I said, you look at the league this season, there's no standout. Like we've said, Oldham, for me, I don't think they're the finished article yet. I don't look at that side and think, yeah, they probably are the biggest club in this division alongside Southend and maybe York as well. But you don't look at that squad and say that's better than everyone else in the division. You don't look at Barnet and say that's better than everyone else in the division. I think it's a good squad, Barnet. I'd like to think that they'll probably be up there, but there's no one that stand out that everyone's looking at now and saying that's a League 2 squad. That might be a League 1 squad, where last season we said Chesterfield, that's a League 2 squad. The season before we were saying Wrexham and Notts County have League 1 squads. This season there's no one for me that's just a standout. Yeah, of course, we'll probably get more of an idea of how the season's going to go a month into the season or so. Let's have a look then. Tom's come in and said, hello again. Again, he says, yeah, of course, Solihull narrowly missed out on promotion last season on penalties. That one must hurt, especially with, I think, 2 years prior, they also lost, didn't they, to Grimsby. So, yeah, I think Solihull Moors, of course, have done very well to get to the position that they're at, but they keep just failing at that final hurdle. And to be fair, I'd hate to do that as a Halifax fan. Lose on penalties like that would be awful. Up the extra 20 quid, Shaman. Yeah, of course, the season tickets have gone up £20. £369 to watch Halifax Town this season for an adult season ticket. For anyone that might be interested in coming along. Fortunately, I'm still 17, so only £100 for myself. But Keza's in tonight, and he said he's basically come back. So welcome, Keza, back to the podcast. I think this might be Trevor. What a shirt, Mr. Franklin.
Yeah.
Love to get you to do a twirl at the end.
But, cheers for the loan. Yeah. I'm getting back in the post tomorrow.
Yeah, we might have to save it for next season. You never know. I'm hoping that we sign Sam Johnson. Yeah, you're not signing him if it's the one from Halifax. He's under contract with us, and if he was to leave, I think because of the time that he spent at Halifax, I don't think he'd go to Rochdale, unfortunately. So you might have to look elsewhere, unfortunately, for you guys. Mason's come in and said, evening, fair play to Wealdstone on signing Mariappa,
yeah.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on him? Yeah.
Oh, I mean, listen, he's 38 years old, so, the age is against him a little bit, but he was still playing League 2 football with Salford last year, and he's had 2 spells at Watford, played for Jamaica, captain Jamaica, played in the Premier League. Huge amount of. We lost Charlie Barker to Crawley. we needed a centre half in the same sort of mould, and I think Mariappa's the one. You're now having Jack Cook there with Mariappa, a young lad called Dean Woodman, who we signed from Rangers as QPR. So it was vitally important. We've got a really young squad. I think we had one of the youngest, if not the youngest squad last year in the National League. And getting someone like Mariappa in, who's local to where we are down in northwest London. He's probably settled back down in that neck of the woods, and he's happy to have his 2 or 3 days training a week. Brilliant signing for us. Let's just hope that, at 37, 38, that a rigorous National League season is something that he can cope with. Pretty sure he probably could. And we've managed to get Craig Eastman in as well, Sutton United's sort of player of the year over the last couple of years. Another brilliant bit of experience with Enzo Bodewine up top. So we've got a bit of a spine there now that's showing experience in that league. And it's what we need to complement what Wealdstone have as a young squad.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then also we've had Mason, who's come in tonight and said, of course, this is something that I want to touch on as well, because it's quite big news. What's your thoughts on the money Maidenhead are going to get from Max Kilman deal to West Ham from Wolves? Of course, yes, £40 million, I believe Max Kilman is leaving Wolves for West Ham for. Of course, Maidenhead have a 10% sell-on clause when, of course, they sold him, which means they would get £4 million. And for a side like Maidenhead, that is life-changing things for the club. What's your overall thoughts on that, Paul? And how?
I don't know if David is in tonight. David Simos, who watches every week, he's a Maidenhead fan. I managed to catch up with him at York Road when we played each other over the Christmas period, and he was sort of saying that they're trying to develop or get themselves a new ground within the town, and their rugby-loving council are kind of putting the kibosh on it. And David could correct me, any other Maidenhead fan could correct me, but I understand that they really want to, through Wealdstone fans who know Maidenhead fans, they want to try and use that money to redevelop a new ground and really sort of establish themselves. And whether they can't do that now because of what the council do, they might be able to make sure York Road is up and running in a better standard than it is. It's one of the oldest football grounds in the world. It's in the country rather. If those haven't been there, it's a football ground, not a football stadium in the true sense of the word. But also, listen, it will allow them, maybe, do they go full time if they're not full time already? Because they've now got a bit of money behind them. £4 million is a lot of cash, isn't it? And all I'd like to think as a National League fan is that it just doesn't get wasted. That they use that money properly to really establish themselves. Alan Devishire's done an unbelievable job over the last few years. They're the perennial Maidenhead are going down sort of pick, aren't they? In 1 to 24s, they always end up in that bottom 4 or 5. They sort of buck the trend every year, and this is only going to help them if the money is used wisely.
Yeah, you'd like to think at Maidenhead they will use that money wisely with how the club is run off the field. And this has kind of been the problem with Maidenhead. They are a club for me that, are pushing above their weight, you might say, historically, when you look. And I think Maidenhead fans can probably agree with that. But they have been a side that have been in this division for quite a long time. They're probably one of the most longest-serving clubs in the National League now, which is quite funny to say. But they can never seem to progress, and try aim for higher mid-table, the playoffs. They often struggle, and it's always that same expectation every single season, which is to survive in the National League. And I think most Maidenhead fans will be happy with that. But you'd like to think with the money that they're going to get, even if it doesn't go into the players' budget, which I don't think that'll be the initial, what they'll initially want to do. I think what they'll firstly want to do is to probably hopefully get a new ground or make the ground better at York Road at the moment, which will probably generate revenue as well because more fans will want to come. And that's something that Maidenhead will probably want to do. And at the moment, although Maidenhead's such a historic, York Road, is such a historic football stadium, like I've said, it's a football ground, not a stadium, like you've said, which basically means that it's not the most attractive place for neutrals or new fans to go down and watch football. Where maybe using that money, putting the stadium up to scratch and, having a fan park, things that every fan and supporter wants to see, if they can introduce that into the stadium in the future with this money, then more fans are going to go, which will grow, the fan base, which will, of course, generate more revenue, which will probably allow them to grow as a football club and be able to compete higher up the division and have new expectations for the club. We've also had coming in tonight, Tom's coming again and said, Forest Green are my early favourites, bought a really good team to the National League and made ridiculous signings from the higher divisions. Yeah, they've kind of been the side that are kind of splashing the cash as well. And Ben Tozer, of course, aside, was obviously known from Wrexham, so we've got that blooming ridiculous throw back in the National League. Unlucky to the 23 other sides who have to play against that, because it is a ridiculously powerful and fast throw that he has. But yeah, what's your thoughts on Forest Green Rovers? Of course, they're in a bit of a recession, aren't they? They've gone up the leagues, got to League One, and then the last couple of years, it's just not gone right, has it?
I mean, yeah, I think what Forest Green are lucky is that they've got an owner as bonkers as he may seem, with his sort of eco warrior ideas and his vegan food and everything else that they have down at Forest Green. Yeah, he seems fairly established. He likes to sort of back his team. I know they've had a bit of change of management last year where they weren't doing so well, and that really affected them. But he's backing the manager. They've gone and made some brilliant signings. And I think they're probably one of those teams that no one really knows too much about. They're not one of those teams that many people probably take much notice of, and that's no disrespect to them. Just go along and they do okay. And those will know Forest Green for their time in the National League previously. But for a lot of us, it's going to be a new visit, a new ground to go and experience. And for Luke and yourself and I, Luke, rather, getting to know a little bit more about how they play, what they do, how well they're sort of structured, and some of the players they've got. So they're certainly one of those teams, Sutton United, we're sort of more familiar with, having come up from the National League not so many moons ago. We're sort of more familiar with them and their manager, having been in non-league last season himself. So yeah, a real unknown quantity, bit like what Rochdale did. I know they're probably their fan base isn't big, but they're not coming in giving it all the, we're going to piss the league and the HMS piss the league and we're going to win the league with Forest Green or whatever. There's been nothing, is there? They've just got on and done their business. They probably respect the league like Rochdale do, and hopefully, they'll be a good addition to the National League.
Yeah.
And who's to know? They possibly could be well up there, but in all honesty, I don't know too much about them at this stage. I'm going to have to learn a bit more as we go along.
I think the way that how they've grown, it was good for the short period of time, but it's not sustainable, and that's why they're back in this division. Forest Green, historically, were nowhere. They were nowhere near the National League. They grew, got into the National League. Bit similar to like a Salford who got promoted and progressed, and a Harrogate. They've got a rich owner who's come in, basically got them into the National League, got them out of the National League, League Two, League One, recruited some ridiculous players. We saw Troy Deeney play for them previously, Reece Brown as well, who went to Huddersfield. They've had some great players there in the last couple of years, but it's kind of gone to pot now, and they've had, I think, back-to-back relegations, haven't they, Forest Green Rovers, and now, of course, they are in the National League again. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do rebuild, but they're still not afraid to be spending the big money like we've seen with Ben Tozer signing for them. It's going to be interesting to see who else they do bring in. We will have a look who else has come in. The Blue Room are back, our friends at Southend United. Evening, gents. Good to see you both. Good to see you as well. And then we've also had John, who's come on and said, welcome back. I think York will finish around 6th to 10th. With improving on-field and progress, and a record ticket sales already with nearly 2,500 season ticket holders with 5 days left of the early bird. Can't wait to be back. Yeah, impressive numbers that for York. And I know we've had quite a lot of negative things to say about Matt Ugler on the field in previous years, but you have to say off the field, it certainly has improved at York City, hasn't it?
Oh, it certainly has, yeah. If there's a feel-good factor around York, like there possibly wasn't this time last year or midway through last season, they got a new manager. He's getting his new players in. Matt Ugler's letting him get on with it. 2,500 season tickets, probably going to push 3 to 3.5, I would imagine, by the season starts. Again, another force to be reckoned with as long as Hinchelwood's just allowed to do what he can do. He's proven himself in the National League South. He's got some good players that have come in. They've got to prove themselves, yes. But again, I think, there'll be an interesting improvement on the National League from last season, because they really were almost treading water at times last year. Never really in much fear of relegation until towards the end. Yeah. But they didn't pull up any trees like we thought they possibly could and should have.
I think with York and Oldham, what I've noticed what they're doing is they're not particularly splashing the cash where they're bringing in players from the higher leagues. I know I've previously said that. York are diving into the National League South to recruit players and recruiting players from this league. And I think that's doing it in the right way. That they're showing their financial muscle that they've got, but they're not doing it to a stupid extent where they're actually bringing in players that are proven at this level and players that are very, very motivated to make that step up from doing well in the league below. What they're both also doing, both clubs, is they're kind of shipping off that dead wood that they've had. I don't know if you've noticed, but Alex Woodyard has left York today, a signing that looked good on paper when he came in, but didn't work out. He's been moved on. Oldham have let a lot of players go as well this season, who are going to be moving on as well. So for me, I think that's something that both sides are doing, and I think now they're kind of getting to grips with the National League, and you'd like to think they'll both be up there and both be able to make the playoffs next season, particularly Oldham after having quite a disappointing end to last season. Someone said Oldham players are like England. I can see the similarities in a way. And then we've also had Chris, who's come in and said, hello, lads, we'll still be watching all the streams, favourite football channel from a Chesterfield fan. It's good to see. It's nice to see that fans are still joining us and tuning in. Someone said, I expect top 7 minimum for Oldham. We've also had coming tonight. We talk about people who are still tuning in. Our Maidstone fan is still here. I was rooting for you to get promoted last season. Of course, unfortunate in the playoffs not to get promoted, but Braintree, a big dark horse for me. Yeah, they were a side that were in the National League probably about a decade ago, probably when I started watching Halifax. I remember going to Braintree, well, not going, but playing against Braintree, and I think they were in the playoffs as well in the National League, and in the following season they got relegated. So I think for them, the expectation will be to survive this season, and hopefully if they do that, they can then push on, like the Ebbs Fleets will be doing this season. They'll be wanting to push on. Same with your Files as well. Let's have a look as well. Who else has come in tonight? Someone's put, hi, Luke and Paul. Welcome, Charlie, to the channel. I think that's a York City. Is that a York fan? Or am I getting mixed up on that profile picture? No, I think Dagenham and Redbridge he does support. And then we are all caught up, I believe, with the live chat. Keep your comments coming in, guys, and we will read them out. If you are new, please don't be afraid to get involved in the live chat. I know there'll be a lot of new people who probably will tune in tonight with it being the first episode, and a lot of new sides entering the division. Welcome to the new sides who have also entered the division as well. But anyway, what we're going to have a look at now, we are going to look at the bookies' favourites for the title. Now, they are a bit laughable, I have to admit. But to be fair, I think anyone's predictions could be laughable. The favourites for them are Barnet, followed by Oldham, followed by Forest Green and Sutton. You can kind of tell they haven't done much research with this. I think they probably need to get people like Tom Williams on the case and people from Off the Line blog. They need to get people like that to do these predictions, because I have to say these aren't very... they're probably not the best, I have to admit. Barnet are the favourites. You can kind of agree that and see that. Oldham being second, but then Forest Green and Sutton. Can you see why with those two? Of course, both just recently been relegated.
I think that has a lot of sway in when the bookies look at it. I mean, listen, the bookies, how much notice do they take of National League? Really, I remember a couple of seasons ago they used to have Reece Brown as a first scorer for Wealdstone at ridiculous odds. And, he'd score most matches, first. And it never changed week on week. So I don't think there's much research, as you said, done in just look and Sutton getting relegated, and they're going to be favourites to go up again. If they actually watched how that actually pans out in reality, then it doesn't often happen, does it? I think Forest Green are maybe in a stronger position than Sutton to get promoted straight away if it was to happen. Sutton have had a big change in their squad. They've always adapted to a National League squad from a League Two squad, whereas Forest Green have kept their League Two squad together. I think it's underneath those four. You could argue those four could be in the top 7 and could get promoted. It's Hartlepool just changed their manager towards the back end of last year and got a new manager in Daryl Sull, which is I think probably a good bit of business in terms of the experience he has. It's a long way from the south where he lived to go and live up in Hartlepool, so he's going to give a good go because he doesn't want to sort of be back down south too quickly, I don't suppose. Rochdale got a bit of investment at the back end of last year, now got a bit of stability, so you could see that. Solihull, I think, would be higher. Southend, it really depends again on their situation off the field. But then Files, Altrincham, these are really tough, really, really tough sort of predictions at this stage because we've not got the settled squads, and there's still going to be players leaving these teams and there's still going to be players joining them. But I wouldn't take much notice too much of the bookies' early favourites, but I don't think they're going to be far off with Barnet and Oldham, if I'm brutally honest, and I think most of us will probably say that. I think York and Dagenham are two that could be higher. Altrincham, that's probably a good spot for them. Yes. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be doing our predictions. This is going to be really tough for us, the 1 to 24. So once we know what the squads are and sit down and have to actually think about it, it's easier said than done.
York, I saw online, it's not very clear, I have to admit here, but I saw online to double check, York are 16 to 1 to win the title. Now, if someone is a betting man, of course I'm not, because I'm underage, I'm 17. For anyone is a betting man, and if I could bet, that'd be worth sticking some money on that. 16 to 1 for them to win the title. I think if I was to bet, if I could, that would be the bet that I would do. Would there be any for you when you look at this where you think maybe an outside shot for them to win the title? I don't think York will win the title at this moment in time, but I think they've underestimated them to a certain extent there. Is there anyone for you, Paul, that you look at and you think maybe it's worth a punt at?
I think you're probably right, actually. At the early stages, Barnet have got to be favourites. I think they're right in that one. Forest Green are going to be in the mix. Not sure at this stage about Rochdale and Solihull. They've kept a lot of their squad, so they're going to have a bit of consistency in that end. But I think York to be up there, Dagenham to be not necessarily to win it, but I think York out of that mid-table that we can see on there have probably got the best bet to run, to ruffle a few feathers at the top end. Yeovil will be an interesting one, big club in this league. Romped the National League South last season. They've kept Mark Cooper on. He knows how to get out of the National League. He's done it with Forest Green. He has won a few promotions. I think it all boils down to someone like Yeovil, how much investment there is to get from National League South to National League. Gateshead, another rebuild, or lost Ed Francis and Dinanga today. So, again, they got to rebuild a very impressive squad. Halifax, you're more averse to me, Luke, but I know that they've lost a couple and probably haven't recruited too many at this stage. So it's a really, really difficult one because pre-season start this week, and then we can really start to see everyone will be out there who's trialist A and who's trialist B and trialist C, and what academies are they coming from, and who could we be getting from probably some of the lesser known leagues in Europe, and to bolster the squads they've already got.
Well, we've just put a poll out to ask you guys, as we're going to bring things to a close in about 5 or 10 minutes or so, but I've just put a poll out saying who you guys will think will win the title. Of course, what we have got 3 of my personal favourites in Barnet, Oldham and York, and then we've got an other option. Now, if you are the other option, please put below which side that is. Paul, top 3 favourites then for you? 3 sides that you think are definitely going to be in the mix at this early stage, of course.
I would go with Barnet. I'd probably go with Forest Green, only because they're quite stable off the field. A lot of the teams that come down are an absolute basket case off it, but they're not. And I would probably, again, on the early shouts, probably go with someone like York. It may change in a couple of weeks when we see the squads, but I think I'm with you, Luke. They're the 3 early favourites for me. Others may disagree because they know their clubs better than we do, and they're sort of looking at them closer. The one thing I will say is Braintree have made a very impressive start to their recruitment. And I think, out of the relegated sides, promoted sides last year, they really struggled, didn't they, with the recruitment? But someone like Braintree have done amazingly well, and I think they'll be the one that may impress a few coming into this league.
Callum Powell, am I correct in saying he's made a move there? He's a player that I actually like when I've seen him play against Halifax. I know Southend fans aren't the biggest fan of him, but when I've actually seen him play as an individual, I've been quite impressed with him. So you'd like to think there maybe he can kick on and kind of be that marquee player for them. Is that something you'd agree with?
Oh yeah, I mean, I can't even remember all the players they have signed, but yeah, you look at it, and yes, they've been in the National League before. Whereas you look last year, Oxford City haven't, but last year, who come up? I can't remember who's gone off as that. Kiddie had been in the National League before, but they didn't adapt again. So I think when you look at Braintree, they've got a very good manager in Angelo Harrop. He's very well regarded. He would have been in the frame for 1 or 2 different National League jobs that were available last year. He stayed with Braintree, and they've really invested in their squad. And I think, they will be a real force to be reckoned with in that bottom to middle part of the table. They may surprise us and push on, but I genuinely don't think I would see them being one of the strugglers in this league because of the way they've recruited and the way that they're going.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Someone's also put thoughts on Dagenham this season. He's also asked, can I shout out my Dagenham and Redbridge fan page that is on Instagram? Just put the account in and I'll put it on the screen for everyone to see if you'd like to do that, if you're still watching. Mate, he's also put thoughts on Dagenham and Redbridge this season. Now they're a side that have been quite busy in the transfer window. I'll just remove that and put us back to our normal setup. But they're a side for me. You look at the signings that they've made. A club with quite a lot of expectation there. They're an ex-EFL club. You'd like to think that now they can be up there, but we say every season, can they now finally kick on and get into the playoffs? And they seem to struggle, and it's always due to the inconsistency. They never seem to have quite a well-balanced squad and a balanced team, but they've always had quite good individuals. That's how I've seen it at Dagenham.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a good manager in Ben Strevens. He did very well with Eastleigh. He knows the National League as a player as well as a manager or coach now. It's been a bit of a slow burner for them, but what they have done is when they brought Ben Strevens in, they did sort of strip the squad a little bit. But they've stuck with him. And they were inconsistent last year, but they did pick up towards the end. And what they've done this year is, I think they've really picked on the firepower up top. They've gone with trying their best to sort of replace who they lost, but also complement what they already have. Because I think previously that was always a bit of a struggle. But I think if they can show a level of consistency with Ben Strevens now being there a season and a half, again, I think they could be pushing up there in the playoffs because of the experience they have at that level with the manager they've got. If you look at someone like they'll probably do what I would see what they do. What Aldershot did last year is where they will sort of be there or thereabouts for 2 or 3 seasons, and all of a sudden they'll be knocking on the door of the playoffs and become more consistent. Will Aldershot do that again? That's the really difficult one for them because Tommy Widgerson's coming into his second season. He's lost Tolad, he's lost a couple of others, but he seems to have recruited well again. So, will Dagenham be similar to what Aldershot were last year and just push on that little bit and sort of tickle the playoffs like Altrincham have, etc.? So I think they'll do all right, Dagenham, and I'm impressed with what they've managed to do so far. And I really like Ben Strevens as a manager. I think he's really good at that level and deserves that opportunity to stay and not having got the sack where it didn't go quite so well with him as they maybe thought he would have done at first.
Dion Pereira's, of course, signed for them. He was at Luton. I think he was at a club prior to that, and I think that was quite a big move when he moved to Luton. So that's quite an interesting one. A player that I think a lot of people from the higher leagues will be aware of. So quite a standout signing there. They've also, of course, brought in Josh Umera. People, of course, have mixed opinions on him. I think you as a Wealdstone fan, is he a player for you that?
No.
No, is he not? He's got
no.
into digits though, isn't it?
No. I'll leave it at that. But Josh Umera would not be in any football team that I ever managed, and I can tell you that now. No, not for me. But I think Wealdstone got the best out of him, then got the best money they could for him when he went to Hartlepool. He was hit and miss with them in the Football League, and I know he suffered with injuries last season. Best of luck to him. Lovely chap. Got a great attitude. Just not for me.
He's clearly got the ability though, because he gets into double digits most seasons.
He's got no ability whatsoever, Luke. Honestly, I can't. No,
right. Against Halifax, I thought it was all right. To be fair,
I'll talk to you about Josh Umera off camera if you want. But
okay, we can do that. But no, at Hartlepool, of course, he got into double digits as well. In the Football League, that was so. You never know; he might do well there.
I don't wish it. I don't wish ill on him. I do hope he does well. He deserves to do well because he is getting the best out of the ability he has. And yes, he does score goals. But to me, being a centre forward, there's more than scoring goals. But we'll leave it at that.
And then, of course, also who we've seen, Rhys Gregor-Cox. He did well at Woking. Probably not last season, but the season prior to that. When they had quite a good season Woking and. Finished, I think, 4th in the end. He was one of the standouts there. So, I think with the National League, with the majority, probably about 3/4 of the clubs, your signings have to be players that are clearly unproven or maybe out of form, had a bad season. That's how you've got to recruit in the National League, unless you've got a lot of financial muscle. So they're clearly doing it in quite a smart way. And I think a lot of signings are clearly risks, but you'd like to think Gregor Cox has clearly got the ability. Dion Pereira has clearly got the ability at higher levels. So maybe this could be the year for Dagenham where they do push on and get into the playoffs and kind of make a bit of a go of making a return to the Football League, because that is the expectation now, I think, overall for Dagenham. Someone's come in and said York actually played awful. Why would they win the league? Neither of us have actually said that they're going to win the league. We're just saying they could potentially be a contender. And just because they played bad last season, after a full summer, a lot can change, especially when you've got a lot of money like they have. And we've already seen them make quite a number of signings early in the window as well, I may add. Let's have a look then at the poll, and we'll bring things to a close. Bring things to a close after that. So we have got obviously 4 options: Oldham, Barnet, York, and we've got an other option now. The favourites are, and of course, not many people have voted because we haven't had the poll on for very long. The favourites are Oldham. Then we've got Barnet, joint with the other option, and then in 4th place we've got York City. So there's no standout there, I would say, who everyone thinks is going to win the title. Thoughts on that, Paul?
I'm not surprised. I think it's very, very difficult at this stage. All the squads look good on paper, don't they? It's easy for us to say they look good when they're written down. They think, oh, bloody hell, they've signed him and they've signed him, but they've got to adapt to their new surroundings. They've got to adapt to the manager, the philosophy, the culture, the tactics, the formations. I think, like it's obvious to say, and you say at any level of football, but you got to get to 10 or 11 games and it starts to give us an idea of where we're at. Early season, you might see a few of those that have been promoted. We'll pick a few off because, they're fresh, they're hungry, they want it. We saw it with Oxford City last season. The likes of York, who've got a big change. Dagenham have had a big change. Will they benefit from that? Will the Altrinchams of this world and Solihull's who are fairly consistent and stable, will they go into a season knowing what they can? The case for every team, and you can look at every team and see and say why they might be at the bottom, why they might be at the top, or why they might not. They just sort of survive in the middle. But again, it's going to be a really, really interesting National League season. I'm really looking forward to it. Wealdstone start on Saturday in their pre-seasons. They've got some good games coming up, and it'd be interesting to see what they do with their players. And obviously, as pre-season start, Luke, we can start looking at what teams are playing well and what teams have got what players, and hopefully that will help us formulate our 1 to 24s in the future.
Yeah, it certainly will. Well, we've done pretty well. We've been going for exactly an hour. We've managed to get a full hour of talking about the National League. I hate to think how long it's going to go on for when teams really do start to get going and we get closer to the season. Of course, next week, fixtures are released. It's always quite an exciting time of the season. Now, we have that long break, don't we? Where we have 2 or 3 months where there's it's a bit of a slog, I suppose, when the season's ended and there isn't particularly too much to do. Of course, fortunately, we've had the Euros going on for a bit of a distraction, but I think, next week's when everyone starts to get really excited about next season, when you know who you're playing, you can plan that first away day, if that's down south or if it's the local one. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And Paul, once again, thanks for joining me. Also, a massive thank you to our sponsors at Cards Accepted. Use the link in the description to get 50% off your order. Also, please remember to like as it gets it out to more people, which builds the community. Also, please subscribe, which will build the community from yourselves. You'll then know when episodes go out, when we do our bonus content like interviews and vlogs as well. And we should hopefully see you next time. Bye for now.